Hi YouTube, welcome to my channel. This is Aurelia's Bibliotech. And I'm going to be doing a reading of the first chapter of My Once and Future Duke, The Wagers of Sin. And the author is Caroline Linden. She is. I think I have some of her, but not sure I've read it or I remember her. So this is what I'll be reading. And it seems like a short first chapter. This book was published February 2018. So here we go. Chapter 1. 1819 London. The Vega Club occupied a curious position in London. Tucked away on a dead-end street not far from St. James Square, it sat precisely midway between the wealth and elegance of Mayfair and the brutal squalor of the Whitechapel rookeries. It made no bones about catering to both extremes. It was said that anyone, duke or dock worker, lady or lady of the street, could apply to become a member. There were only two requirements of those fortunate enough to secure the stamped silver token of membership. Pay your debts. Hold your tongue. It was rumored that members were required to take an oath pledging not to reveal anything that happened within Vega's walls. Rumored because no one could or would confirm it. When confronted directly, members would claim not to know anything about it before quickly walking away. But since even the most determined scandalmongers were frustrated in their attempts to learn many details about the gaming club, the pledge of secrecy became part of Vega's legend, whether or not it was true. And that encouraged the spread of all manner of stories about what did go on. Jack Lindaville, Duke of Ware, knew all about Vegas. It was the bane of his life, even though he himself never went there. His younger brother Philip frequented the place, along with his crowd of friends. They invited him to accompany them from town to town, but Jack always declined. He knew why he was welcome at their tables, and it wasn't for his charm and wit. Young men on fixed income, even generous fixed incomes, were always in search of someone wealthy to play against. And as Philip often reminded him, Ware was one of the richest dukedoms in England. Jack interpreted that to mean that he looked like a prime mark for Philip's friends with empty pockets. Unfortunately for them, he wasn't fool enough to go. One bit of bad luck and a man's life could be ruined. His lip curled at the thought as his carriage turned up St. Martin's Lane on its way to the Vega Club. Bad luck, Philip claimed, had been the cause of his most recent downfall. The two of clubs, when all he needed to win was any card higher than a 3. Philip was sure he had calculated the odds correctly, and the dealer had made a mistake, although he dared not say so and risk his membership. But the result was that he had signed a note for almost £2,000, which he could not pay. Philip was penitent. He apologized for asking such a favor. He promised it would never happen again, even though it had happened several times before. But he also told their mother, who swept into Jack's study in a storm of indignation and insisted he settle the debt to prevent Philip being humiliated or impoverished. At first, Jack would have none of it. Philip brought it on himself, and if he was man enough to sign a note that size, he was man enough to work out how to honor it. But his mother argued and then cajoled, and then she began weeping and bitterly accusing him of callous indifference to his family duty. At that, Jack relented. When the Duchess made up her mind, there was no reasoning with her. The carriage rocked to a halt. The footman opened the door and Jack stepped down. He paid his debt for Philip, but not without repercussions. His brother had an independent income thanks to his mother, but he also drew an allowance from the Ware estate, which Jack controlled. For 7 years, he'd safeguarded those estates, and he'd be damned if his hard work would be siphoned off by Philip's bad luck at the card table. Then lit, he strolled into the club. A Burly fellow in impeccable evening clothing appeared before he'd taken 2 steps. Good evening, sir. May I help you? I'm here to see Dashwood, Jack replied, naming the club's owner. He drew out one of his cards and offered it. Is he expecting you? Jack smiled humorously. I dare say he would be surprised by my arrival. Philip was not shy about trading on the war name. If Mr. Dashwood were half as canny as his reputation suggested, he'd probably been anticipating Jack's visit from the moment Philip scrawled his signature on that marker. The manager gave him an appraising glance. Perhaps not. Would you care to wait in the dining room? God, no. He might see someone he knew and be caught in conversation. Jack wanted this over and done with as soon as possible, preferably with no one aware that it had happened. I'll wait here, he replied in a tone that made it clear he did not expect to wait long. The manager bowed his head. Perhaps you'd rather play a hand or two in the meanwhile. Over the man's shoulders, Jack could see into the main salon of Vegas. It wasn't tawdry or garish, as he had somewhat expected, but refined. It looked like a normal gentleman's club, except for the women. Not house wenches clinging to men's sides, but society ladies. Jack's brows went up a fraction as he glimpsed Lady Rotherwood playing whist. Vegas doesn't exclude the ladies, remarked the manager, following his gaze. It's a bit of surprise to some gentlemen, but they soon see the benefit. Jack's mouth firm. Empty-headed ladies could lose a fortune just as easily as reckless young men. No doubt. He wondered if Philip had ever lost so dramatically to a woman and then decided it hardly mattered. Money lost was money lost. Still, it piqued his curiosity. Ladies gambling with men. How novel. The manager left to inform Mr. Dashwood, and Jack took a step forward to survey the club through the protective screen of a tall stand of palms. He recognized Agnes Whitley and Fergus Fraser, some of Philip's mates. They sat at a table with another man and a woman in a vivid crimson gown who had her back to him. Her dark hair was swept up in a twist, exposing her pale skin. She wore a thick black ribbon around her neck, tied in a neat little bow at her nape, and the loose end curled enticingly, tempting a man to tug it loose. Jack's eyes lingered on her. What sort of woman would be a member of a gaming club? Every decent woman would shy away from the mere thought of it. Lady Rotherwood, for all that she was a viscountess, was known to be a bit fast. What were the requirements for membership, he wondered. Did they differ for men and women? Not that Vegas could be very stringent, as Philip had no difficulty gaining entry. Philip, with only his illustrious name and considerable charm, and abominable luck at cards to recommend him. Whitley made an exclamation, tossing down his cards. Fraser laughed, printing in victory. He reached for the pile of money in the center of the table, but the woman stopped him by laying her fingers on his wrist. Jack had no idea what she'd said, but from the way Fraser's face went blank with shock, he supposed it wasn't good news. The other man laid down his cards and began to laugh, a hearty bellow that turned heads. Clearly, the woman had trounced them all. And rather than being dismayed at being the focus of attention, she responded to it. She said something that made Whitley give a shout of laughter, and fellows at the next table chuckled. Jack couldn't see her face, but he could tell she was pleased just from the angle of her head, tipped ever so slightly to one side as she collected her winnings, and Whitley shuffled the cards for another round. No wonder Philip liked the place. Jack wondered if his brother knew the lady in crimson. Your Grace, said a voice behind him. Jack turned, glad to shake off that thought. The manager was back. Mr. Dashwood will see you. He led the way through a door set discreetly beside the palms, down a short corridor to another door. He knocked once, then swept it open and bowed as Jack went in. Nicholas Dashwood, at your service, Your Grace. Dashwood bowed. He was a tall, wrinkly fellow, his face all lean, hard lines and angles. I apologize for the delay. I didn't expect you. I've come about my brother's death. One corner of Dashwood's mouth lifted at Jack's cool tone. He said you might. Jack repressed a spike of fury that Philip had presumed that strongly enough to tell Dashwood. He should have known, though. Philip was shameless in getting out of anything unpleasant. The club owner walked around his desk and picked up a paper line on the surface. £2,120. Jack took a breath to control his temper yet again. Philip had lied about that too, claiming it was less than 2,000. May I see? Dashwood handed it over with a faint smile. He must deal with this all the time. It took only a cursory examination to determine that it was Philip's handwriting, promising the large sum to Sir Lester Bagwell. Is it customary for you to guarantee debts for your members? Jack handed back the note. I guarantee nothing. Dashwood leaned against his desk. Members are free to exchange notes or funds directly. On occasion, they prefer to have me hold them. Not as guarantor, but as a favor. I am an intermediary, if you will. Intermediary, if you will. We have only a few rules at Vegas, the most important of which is to pay your debts. Meaning Sir Lester feared Philip wouldn't pay what he owed and wanted Dashwood to enforce the rule of the club. Grimly, Jack wrote a draft on his bank for the sum, mentally exercising his brother. Without a word, he offered it to Dashwood, who handed him Philip's note in exchange. A pleasure, Your Grace. Dashwood went to the door. If you're ever in search of a table to play, I hope you'll return to Vegas. Not bloody likely, thought Jack. Dashwood escorted him to the front of the house. On impulse, he looked toward the main salon again, through the palm fronds. His brother had solemnly promised to give up the tables for a month in penance, to retrench on his spending, and learn some moderation in his habits. Philip would not be here. But the lady in crimson. He had the strangest desire to see her face, just to know what sort of woman joined a gaming hell. To his shock, he did spy his brother's dark head at the center of the room. In a small crowd of people gathered around a table, Jack stopped short. Already Philip was back at it, placing wages he couldn't afford. No doubt telling anyone who asked that his brother would pay his losses tonight, tomorrow, on into eternity. As he watched, a cheer broke out, and Philip threw up his hands and laughed. Jack knew that mannerism. Philip was losing. He always lost with a laugh, a quip, a grandiose gesture. It was only later, when he had to contemplate the consequences of his losses,